And welcome to TNN Coaching Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic.space interconnected podcast. I'm so happy to see you all. I'm hoping that you're having a lovely day. And today, as always, we're going to uplift our soul to the next level. And this time we're going to focus on uplifting our soul. Also, we're going to uplift our mind, raise our vibration, and get to learn new tools, skills, techniques that will enhance and enrich your life. Over the past few years, many people ask me about ceremonies. Have you done the ceremony? Have you been inside of the ceremony? Have you experienced the ceremony? And usually people ask me for the guidance. What do I think about ceremony in itself? And then also, what do I think about different ceremonial plants? Ayahuasca, peyote, cacao, and so on and so forth. And because those questions were coming, I'm not the expert. To respond to all of this, I've decided to dedicate this podcast in talking about ceremonies, in getting to understand what is the purpose of the ceremonies in our own life or in the collective life, and also for listeners to understand how the ceremonies can benefit their life and how can you use the ceremonies to enrich your personal development, to become a better version of yourself, and to explore and understand the depth of your subconscious mind. And as always, I have great friends in great locations. And this is the reason why this podcast is so popular, because I love inviting the friends who are going to come and enrich our conversation in this friendly chat. And today with me, joining me, it's Geronimo MM. I'm not going to say his surname because you can then see it on the social media, but I'm going to tuck his social media down there. But I love this Geronimo MM. It sounds very mysterious. He is an ayahuasca community activist and independent researcher. He has produced and written 2 documentaries about ayahuasca. The first about Brazilian ayahuasca churches, and the second about use of ayahuasca in the treatment of drug addictions. In the last 20 years, he has traveled extensively through South America, researching broad range of ayahuasca practices, and has lectured internationally on ayahuasca tourism and appropriation of indigenous knowledge. Nowadays, he is an activist. He is working as a social innovator, coordinator of the Ayahuasca Foundation, and he's also a founding member on Plantaforma, platform for the defense of ayahuasca in Spain. In the last 5 years of his life, he has devoted most of his energy to figure out how the ceremonial plants can be integrated outside of their culture of origin and how can they be applicable to our Western world. He also curates a list of ayahuasca news. He has a Facebook account and blog and so on and so forth. And we're going to tag all of this later on in the description of this podcast. So welcome, Geronimo.
Thank you, Zoran. Good to be here.
So let's start from the beginning. I always love to start asking our guests, tell us their journey into the ceremony, so to say. So what was the beginning of your journey into understanding the ceremony to begin with, and then also diving into ceremonial plants?
Well, about 20 years ago, I started collaborating with a friend who's a filmmaker on a documentary project about sort of what was surviving, what are called plant teachers, sort of indigenous plants. We would call them psychedelics that were still used by indigenous people, and we were making a documentary about this. And it was through this that I ended up in the mountains of Oaxaca in Mexico, in a very, very remote village where an very old indigenous man gave us ololuiki seeds. These are seeds from this sort of blue flower plant. And he took us through what was then my first shamanic ceremony. I had previous experiences with psychedelics, but I never had them in a ritual context. And that was really what happened that night and what I saw that night. I can't go into detail, sadly, because it's kind of a long story. It's a story of its own. Mm-hmm. But that made me really reconsider everything that I had been believing about many, many things, including what these substances were and the power of these substances. And that was, you could say, the beginning of a very long journey that takes me all the way up here. I continued to work on the documentary. There was more than 10 more years of that. It turned out being a number of documentaries. I became fascinated by, what you could broadly call indigenous knowledge, especially South American peoples, and ended up working on 3 or 4 documentaries, all of them revolving around different aspects of that, of these. And then also slowly, as my interest got deeper, I began to not just sort of research and interview people, but I began to participate and join sort of more activist circles and groups and stuff. And that was how I eventually ended up joining the ICEERS Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that works for the integration of ethnobotanicals, or sort of these sort of psychedelic plants that have a history of traditional use into our Western cultures. So it went, you could say that it went from a sort of very personal quest. I had a personal curiosity about this. And also, I think like most everybody, I had personal issues that I was trying to work through, and the intuition or the feeling that there was something here that could help me. And sure enough, it did. Not only it helped me in a way, it turned my life around to the point that, again, a very long process of 20 years, it has now for the past 4 or 5 years become all I do.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. I mean, I'm curious about exploring a little bit more for the people who are not really knowledgeable about the ceremonies. So if you go with the phenomena of ceremony and the indigenous knowledge that has been shared in the ceremony, what is the purpose of the ceremony to start with? Why would people in indigenous tribe, in indigenous culture, come together in the ceremony to explore themselves and to explore their personal issues or whatever they're facing with at this moment in time? What would you say on that?
I think there's, you could, very broadly speaking, you could separate on the one side, okay, what we could say the effects of these plants. And the effects of these plants are, roughly speaking, what could be understood as medicinal. Not exactly what we understand as, Western medicine, but, medicinal is a good concept. So the plants contain compounds, and these compounds have a quote unquote medicinal effect on people. This is why psychedelics are also being now explored for psychiatry. So that's the gift. Let's say the gift is the medicine. Mm-hmm. But then there is something that is, you could call the wrapper. Mm-hmm. So if I gave you, if I made you a gift, for example, a shirt, and I just said, hey, I brought you a gift, Soren, and I threw the shirt in your face, it would not be the same if I gave you a gift and it would be exactly the same shirt. But I put the shirt in a really nice package with beautiful wrapper and a beautiful thing and a process that open and a beautiful card that says, this shirt, Soren, I bought for you in a very far away market when I was traveling in Istanbul. It's very hard to find. This shirt has very special linen. It was made by this very old man, and I had to go to his house and I had to find these things, and boom, 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 boom. Let's say the shirt is exactly the same. It's always been exactly the same shirt. Yet your experience of this shirt changes as these things, right? So wrapping things is a sort of ritual. The gift is the same, and yet the wrapper changes everything. It really changes everything. And then the story, the way that you hold, the way that you relate to the shirt also changes according to what story, what beginning, how it arrived. So this is perhaps a good way for people to understand, to begin to understand. People, I think, especially people that are not familiar with ritual or with ceremony, or people that believe that ritual or ceremony are some sort of like set of empty gestures, which, of course, in a sense, they are, except they're not, right? It's just a piece of paper wrapping a shirt, yes, but it changes the experience of the person. And we're all persons here. If we were machines or robots, then it wouldn't make a difference, but we're not, right? So indigenous people who have been working with these plants for many, many hundreds of years or thousands of years, they know that they're medicinal and they are very good at using the medicinal part of these plants. But not only that, they've gotten really, really good at wrapping the experience. So it's so much better than if I just gave you a pill or if I just threw a shirt on your face. It changes everything. It not only changes the experience that you have, it changes how will you relate to that experience for the rest of your days. Because that's what happens with the wrapper under. It changes how you will relate. Every time you put that shirt, you will look at that shirt differently because of how it came and the story that came with it. So again, I'm giving an explanation for people that are essentially scientific minded and skeptics and don't believe. For people that are not scientific minded and not the skeptics and that tend to believe, then I could speak about, energetic, spiritual aspects and all of these other things that are involved with it, that people that work with ceremony and rituals is their common trait. But, for the average, I don't think you need to be a believer in sort of spiritual realities to understand and appreciate the importance of ceremony.
I love how you explain the ceremony through the wrapper. I think it speaks louder than it words, and it's also impacting people who are believer or not believer. You mentioned a few times the medicinal aspects, and let's just focus now on the specific medicinal plant ayahuasca. So, what are the medicinal impacts or aspects of that of ayahuasca?
Traditionally, in cultures that use ayahuasca traditionally, it's very often referred as this, the medicine, la medicina. And many of the songs speak to it in this sense. In our society, we have a somewhat expanded and limited understanding of what medicine is. Medicine is something that is taught in universities and it is done by doctors and you require a license. And if you claim to be practicing medicine and you're not a medical doctor, you could actually get in legal trouble. So we have to step a little bit away from that to understand what we're talking about when we say medicine.
Okay.
As indigenous people understand it. Why? Because for indigenous people, illness and medicine or health and medicine are not just an issue of, for example, an accident that you had or certain bacteria that just randomly came into your body and therefore made you sick, or, a degenerative condition that you have in your bones where calcium is running out, right? The way we deal with medicine, it's a lot closer to the way we deal with sort of mechanics, for example, with cars. Your car is broken, you take it to the garage, they take the bad pieces out or they fix what is broken and they send it back out. That's how we deal with medicine in our society. In the indigenous understanding, medicine is coated with meaning. So for us, there's no reason why you broke your leg. Well, you fell and you broke your leg and that's it. And there's no reason why you got sick. You just, there was a virus and you happened to catch it. It's all sort of random. Indigenous people don't believe there is this randomness. And also, they have a much broader understanding of what disease is. So things that we would call, for example, I don't know, bad luck or being in a little bit of a funk. They consider the topic of medicine, and these things are also treated by doctors. So when I say that they use ayahuasca as a medicine, they use ayahuasca for a lot more things that we would consider medicine. So I spoke with an old Kofan Taita, which is a shaman from the Kofan tribe, and he told me ayahuasca is a plant that teaches humans how to live.
Okay.
Now, we don't consider how to live a medical problem, but they do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know how to live, then things start going wrong in every direction of your life, not just what we would consider properly physically, but in many other aspects. So when they say that they are healing, and they say this quite seriously, they are healing things that we would not consider diseases, but they're affecting change of them regardless. So again, I'm trying to sort of bring sort of cultural, transcultural topics into translating them into sort of a Western language. Mm.
So basically, it's holistic. It's across, what we consider to be a traditional medicine in the Western world. It impacts you on many different levels, and it helps you live more healthy life, so to say. Teaches you how to live life.
Yeah, and it's also community-based. So it's also the community that is getting healed. This is also an aspect that we have lost. We believe that health is an individual topic, a personal topic, not a communal one.
What I would love to do now, just kind of to get a little bit of juice behind this conversation, it's all about personal experiences. So you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that once when you first time went to this ceremony, this session, your life transformed and changed. You managed to work out through a lot of the personal issues you had at that moment in time, see the world completely from a different point of view and different lens. So if you were to choose one struggle you have had at that moment in time, or throughout the experiences that you have had in these ceremonies, what was the struggle that you have had, and how did that ceremony help you resolve it, heal it, transform it, and apply it back into your life so that you feel that the benefits of that experience were really applicable back into our, let's call it, a westernized life?
Good God, that's a difficult question. Because there's been so many.
Think about something recent, for example. I can share mine, while you're thinking,
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, for example, for me, one of my ceremonial experiences was that I was looking into this aspect of being able to trust life. And I was always under impression that I was 100% in my faith. I was completely dedicated to trust. I've trusted my life path, so to say. And in that ceremony, I really wanted to receive a further guidance because I was in transition, I was in transformation, I was uncertain around the next steps I needed to take in my life. I was a little bit confused about my choices and then confused about the decisions as well. What do I decide now? What do I choose? Shall I do this? Shall I do that? Right? But it was all about, trusting that life path, trusting the flow. And I actually wanted to receive the guidance around the choice in that specific ceremony. And for me, what happened, as we call it, as a medicine or ayahuasca, or the ceremony teaching you how to live life, was that the issue that I do not have a faith and that I'm controlling life instead of trusting life was brought up to my attention. So, for example, all the situations and circumstances when I was over-managing, over-controlling, micromanaging myself, people around me, everything around me, like really being in control. I've never saw that. I actually thought that I was completely in the flow. So I was really confused to start with in that ceremony. And it was a struggle, it was a struggle because I was saying, no, something is wrong here. I have full faith. Right? And the whole experience was saying, no, you do not have full faith. You're a control freak. It was not that word, but it was what it was meant at this moment in time. And you have to learn how to let go of control to truly trust the deeper workings of your life, right?
Yeah.
For me, that was this extremely challenging ceremony and one of the most pivotal ceremonies in my life. And then it illuminated this blind spot of me feeling, look at me, I'm so enlightened, involved, spiritual, I'm coach, I am teaching other people how to trust, but I am not fully trusting, So that was, one of mine, so
Yeah.
this really.
I'm laughing because I know you for years, and this, this aspect of the micromanaging really resonates. Confirms something that I had observed. So I think of course, I think that reminds me of two stories. I think this is one of the most surprising things, about ayahuasca and about these plants in general, is when they, instead of confirming, they actually show you something that is really, really the opposite of what you believed. And that's when, people begin to talk about, ayahuasca told me, and it seems to come from outside of yourself, because you yourself are a completely different place, and then how did you get this message that actually contradicts what you believe? So that reminds me of two stories, two people I know. I won't name names. One of them tended to take things too seriously and was always in some sort of, big, everything had all of these consequences, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and just sort of taking things very seriously, always very stuck up. This person drank ayahuasca, and ayahuasca made them laugh. And suddenly they began to laugh, and suddenly they began to laugh, and they couldn't stop laughing, and they discovered in themselves a laughter that they hadn't heard since they were little kids. They realized that they were able to laugh like this, but it's just been so long. So, to this person, ayahuasca showed them lightness when they were in a state that was generally kind of heavy and very serious always, right? So then another person goes and drinks the same ayahuasca with the same group. So, different person, but all the other circumstances were the same. And then this person instead drinks ayahuasca and gets these terrible pains in the stomach, and terrible pains and terrible pains. And he's fighting ayahuasca, and he's even insulting her. He's saying, you bitch, what are you doing? And every time he says that, oh, you bitch, the pain is worse. The pain is worse. And it just goes on for a while, and he's like, why this pain? Why are you doing this to me? And the ayahuasca says, I'm doing this to you because you're a little shit and you have no respect for anything.
Wow.
And he keeps going, and then it gets to a point where the pain is so bad that he actually says, it's true, I'm a little shit and I have no respect for anything, and you're worthy of respect. And then all the pain lifts up, and suddenly he's feeling normal and very good again. And he's thinking, oh, well, that was amazing. Thank you very much. But you're still a bitch. And the pain would come back again, like this throughout the night. No, so the issue in this person's life was actually the opposite. It was an issue of tending to frivolize, very frivolous position towards life, where nothing was important, nothing mattered, everything was taken as a joke, sort of very cynical. So the opposite of the other person was too serious. This person was too unserious. And this person, what they got is they were taught seriousness. And at the end of the night, they understood that certain things were really serious and they were not to be laughed at, and they were to be respected. And that was their lesson. So it's funny how you see, like, there's three stories here, and it's always sort of what comes out during the night, the medicine, turns out to be the opposite of what the person brought. And I think very often there's a lot of this in ayahuasca, and it's part of the reason also why I take it so seriously. I think if ayahuasca just confirmed what people believe, which also sometimes it does, if you had drunk ayahuasca and it had told you, of course, but you always trusted life, then you could say, well, you just took something and you're just like playing with your own head, going to, you're just confirming what you already believe. You're thinking out loud. It's when these things happen that are the opposite of what the person is thinking, that one sort of has to stop and wonder where it comes from.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. And I guess, in that definition, we can see that is the medicine, the ability of ceremony and the plant in itself to show you and to relieve or reveal certain things to you that you never thought about or you never saw. In coaching terminology, we might call it your blind spots, something that you are completely unaware of, and sometimes people might be aware of around you, but I never tell you. But now there is this state when you can see yourself through the full lens of your blind spot, and then awake that.
And that's the medicine, exactly. That's what the indigenous people would refer to as the medicine.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's absolutely gorgeous. So when as you've been working with this for a long time, and I really want to dedicate a little bit of conversation towards that, because I think it's important that a lot of the movement is happening right now between South America and Europe and the rest of the world. The ceremonies are happening all around the world. I know that sometimes people reach out to me because I'm in a development profession, and they ask me, what about this, ceremony or this shaman in London, and what about this one in Paris, and what about this one here and this one there? Are they good, right? Can I trust? Can I go to this? And honestly, I don't know what to say most of the time. Most of the time I would say you follow your intuition, see if this is right thing for you. I would say something along the line, you need to be in the nature, you need to be healthy, you need to be in a good circle, you need to be with the friends. But I can see, this is happening to more and more people. So as you are within this, paradigm, what would you share on that, for the people who are exploring it, but that doesn't know how to trust it, where to go, where to do it? I mean, I know this is a difficult question.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. Everybody wants to. That's the question I get all the time. Where do I go to drink ayahuasca? Mm-hmm. It's the $1 million question, and right now it's the Wild West. And also, unfortunately, being the Wild West, people seem to lack, just sort of very basic common sense that would apply to anything else. So, if you were to call an electrician, would you feel better if this was a man with gray hair, that it looks like he's been an electrician his whole life, or if he was a kid that was 16, with pimples and, well, I mean, chances it could be that this 16-year-old kid is actually a brilliant electrician, and even better than the old man. It could be, but, you can make an educated guess that, older people have more experience than younger people. And this applies to all professions. Yes. The other thing is it's a very valid question to ask, because this is not the electrical wires in your house that this person is going to fix. This is the electrical wires, inside your body, inside your soul, breathe with whoever you want. But, drinking ayahuasca with somebody is not trivial. What will happen to you is not trivial, and we discuss a few experiences. So the wrapper that comes with experience that you're going to have is not trivial at all. It can make things. It's a difference between the shit thrown at your face. And some people throw the shirt at your face. They just take your money. They give you ayahuasca, anyway. They get up in the middle of the night. They leave, and you're there by yourself. I mean, it's just like throwing the shirt in your face. And then some people are extremely careful about it. Now, how do you find out the difference? Well, you want to ask questions. Mm-hmm. You want to ask, and it's completely legitimate to ask people how they learn, where they learn from, where it came from. They say, oh, I learned in South America. Well, then, from indigenous shaman, then, very easy question is, do you speak Spanish? Mm-hmm. No? I mean, that will give you an idea, if they're not Spanish speaker, of how committed or what kind of teaching or learning they could learn from this other person that they claim to have learned with. People who have mixed a lot of teachers, I learned from this, and I do Khmer ritual, and like Sufi rituals, and people that list a number of things, I tend to distrust, because for me, each one of these things is like a PhD. So it's like having a person telling me I have 7 PhDs. And it's like, well, you have 7 PhDs. I mean, it's not impossible. Somebody out there can do it, but that's quite remarkable. But the thing is, like in many cases, when it's a Western person and they're talking about indigenous initiations, they're talking about something. So it's more like if an indigenous person told you, no, I grew up in a village in the Amazon and I didn't go to school until I was 16. Mm-hmm. And now I have 7 PhDs from Western universities. And you're like, wow, you are really, you must be a genius, because this is doubly difficult. Mm-hmm. So, these are sort of common sense, people that seem too interested in money. People that will sell you this as some sort of panacea that can cure anything. Mm-hmm. That's a bad sign. People that are not interested in you, that are not asking questions about you, that are not really trying to find out who you are, what's your intention. All of these things, none of these things are no-go zones. All of these things can give you clues. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. About what type of person you have in front of you. With that said, there might be a person that is very good at running the session, very skilled, facilitator or even shaman, that does not talk to you and is not interested in you, and it's kind of young. It could also happen. I'm not. None of these rules are 100%. They're just sort of clues. So you have to get good at picking those clues, and like you say, and listening to yourself. The fact of the matter is that when people embark on this experience, there's usually, and it's a process, there's usually a few years where they try many different things and many different people. And then eventually they settle with one where there's a certain connection or resonance or whatever. And then that tends to stick, and they tend to stick with that person. That's how it works.
Yeah.
I had a good friend that did work in, Accenture for many years. So, very sort of been very deep in corporate. And he said that advertising is the tax of the irrelevant.
Yeah.
So if you have to pay for people to pay attention to you, there's something irrelevant there. What does this mean? If you look back, you know that all the good chiropractors that you know, and all the good acupuncturists, and most of the good doctors, and most of the good dentists, their offices their agendas are full. This is not because advertising. This is because word of mouth and good work and time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same with shamans.
Mm-hmm.
Good shamans that have been working for many years, they don't need to go out and buy Instagram ads or Facebook ads or any of these things. So if things are popping in your feed, you're looking at someone that for whatever reason hasn't been able to grow through the organic process of doing good work and letting word of mouth work its magic. That's for me another clue.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, because I think this is extremely important, because it's becoming more and more popular, right? And then
and more commercialized, and the level is going down, quite frankly. More and more people are entering very quickly, training very quickly, and very quickly setting up operations and putting and buying ads, and just sort of swiping on the more novice or least sophisticated or more ignorant demand.
yeah.
So these are people that they don't know where to look, and then Google finds it for them, or Google, and chances are if Google put that ad in front of you,
Consider it. I know that in our audience we have people, younger people, we have people in the mid-generation, also throughout different age groups, but I know that we have a specific group of younger people who are watching to this podcast as well. So how do you know if you are ready to explore this? How do you know, if you're younger and if you're in the stage of, you've heard about it, right? You heard about it. Your friends are talking about it. Friend is traveling to South America and comes back and says, oh my God, I had this extraordinary experience. I've done this ceremony and this happened to my life and that happened to my life and so on and so forth. And you're receiving all of this, but you're sitting somewhere, let's say in Paris or in Milan or in Madrid. And then you feel, wow, I would love to do this. My friend has done it. So how do you know on a deeper level that this is the right choice for you and that you should embark on that journey and explore this? What would you say on that? I know this is a tough question, but I'm asking you tough questions all the way through this podcast.
We're back to the medicine. All medicines have counterindications, right? You can look in the prospect, even aspirin, even cold medicine, very sort of over-the-counter medicines. They have counterindications that you shouldn't. Ayahuasca has also counterindications. So you have certain, not many, but you have like physical problems, blah, blah, blah. If you're taking antidepressants, if you had a history of, so there's counterindications for ayahuasca. But the main counterindication, the reason where you absolutely should not do this is not wanting to do this. So if you don't want to do, for whatever reason, ayahuasca, you should never let your friends, anybody convince you of it. Because you might have a really, this is all about cooperating. Sometimes I say ayahuasca is like a kiss. If you want to be kissed, it's a wonderful thing. It's beautiful, but if you don't want to be kissed, it's sloppy, disgusting, intrusive. It's awful. An unwanted kiss is an awful thing. So you definitely need to take ayahuasca. If you don't want it, don't have it. That's the first thing, and then the second thing I would say is that you should have an intention. You should have something you want. And this happened to me the first night that I took the Ololuiki seeds, I'm going now back to the beginning of the program. When I was in Mexico, the first time I had an experience with an indigenous healer. And then we took the plant, and then when the effects came up, he turned to me and he said, Jeronimo, what do you want? Ask for it. What healing do you want? Ask. Now you have to ask in a loud voice. And I realized I had no idea why I was there. I'd just been there to have an experience. And that triggered and created an incredibly long and difficult and complicated night that I won't go into, full of insights. But I would say these are the two important things is, are you sure that you want it? And then why?
What is your intent?
Why? And when you have solved these two questions, if the answer to the first one is yes, and then you have an answer to the second one, then you can start looking.
Wonderful. Let's shift it to the next level, from the personal to collective. Why do you believe these plants are impacting the world so much at this moment in time as they're traveling across the world? And what is their role in our human evolution? Especially, what is the role of the plants and how they impact Western society and how we evolve to become more connected to ourselves, more wise, more mature? What is the bigger game that is in play here?
I'm not so keen on sort of big sort of the big narratives that are sometimes built around these plants. But I would say that if you take the idea of the blind spot, which happens at the individual level, and you blow it up to the collective level, what happens when a collective of people, when the blind spot of a collective of people suddenly becomes visible? And and you sort of what I've seen has to do with something that could be very roughly said to have to do with remembering what you forgot, and then remembering what we forgot. And what we have forgotten are many, many things, including the power of ceremony and the power of ritual. These are things that were in Western cultures, that we practiced and that we understood. A certain connection with nature, a connection with ourselves. It goes on and on and on. And also deeper, and I believe, our own roots. We have forgotten who we are, even in the sense that indigenous people understand who we are. Where are you from? What is your territory? Who are your ancestors? What is your culture? Who are your people? And where do you come from? This we have forgotten. We have become international creatures of individual pursuits. I find that as a sustained work with ayahuasca, with all these other plants in good circumstances, tends to remind and then reconcile people with who they are as individuals, but also as part of collectives and as part of family lines and as part of lineages and as part of cultures and as part of a land, a territory. That would be the quick answer.
Wonderful. So I love that you managed to bring it to the, specifics, remembering who you are, remembering your land, your territory, your ancestors, remembering that, I think that for me, throughout the process of ceremony, I recalled a lot of the things that I forgot throughout my life, because being international, being, traveling across the world, moving the countries, you kind of forget, where you came from. And I think that if you don't know where you're coming from, it's very difficult for you to live a powerful life because you don't have a reference point later on in your life. Yeah.
And you're not receiving the force and the energy that comes from there, that flows through there to you and through you to the next generations. So if you don't understand yourself as a vessel that is part of a flow that started long before you and will continue long after you, I think you're missing a huge chunk of what life is, and what we're here for.
Wonderful. We're coming closer to the end of our recording. Two things I would love to ask. I put people usually in a spot here. I didn't prepare you for this question. This is a personal development podcast, and people come here to, learn something about themselves or to get inspired with a new tool. So when you think about your own spiritual practice and what you do in your daily life to be the best possible version of yourself, and if you connect that to ceremonies, if you want to, what is one tool that you use for you that you would love to share with the audience as this is something that does magic in my life, or really helps me sustain my energy, be a better person, remember who I am, and keep on evolving?
That's really tricky, because recently, I've been thinking a lot about this thing I was told that was said by, it was a very well-known psychotherapist, psychologist, very late in his life. And he said that he had come to realize that any tool that you give people without, 10 years of serious inner work gets twisted into it turns so tools are usually developed by people who have done a lot of work, and then these tools are very useful for them. Yes. But then when they give it to people that haven't done so much work, they take the tool and they they pervert it. You could say, for example, sometimes this happens, for example, I think with very, very high mystical ideas, like all is one, the world is perfect as it is. These are highly mystical ideas developed by people after decades of inner work and mystical work. But sort of people that have done this, they can pick it up to justify abuse, to permit themselves to do a spiritual bypass. So I'm hesitant about tools. I think the work is unavoidable.
Mm-hmm. So
and the work and it's not pretty. It's not pretty, and it cannot be done by yourself. You need not only the help of, for example, the plants, but you need the help of people that have been there before, that can spot things in you that you don't spot, and can guide you through this very long process of shedding things and remembering who you are. And so I would say any quick solution, it's kind of doubtful. And I mean, no, that's there you're, people, that's then you begin to bypass. You begin, you're using shortcuts. And sometimes ayahuasca and psychedelics are very much used as a shortcut. And that's, we haven't spoke about it. That would be a whole other show about the dangers of it and where things go wrong, and how people also misuse these experiences and these plants, and how people take these plants and instead of becoming more clear, they become more confused, because this also happens.
So if it's not a tool, what are you working on? When you said it's a work, you're working to make yourself feel better. You're working to, maintain your energy and your connection. What is something that you use in that work to help yourself out? It doesn't need to be a tool. It can be a practice.
I mean, I have a therapist that I've spoken to every week for now 4 years. I have a group of friends that have, not only supported me but also called me on my shit. When I was and I've had, and I think, this is really sort of, for me, key is that even with all the help of ayahuasca and 20 years of ayahuasca, there are certain things about yourself that only other people can show you, not even ayahuasca. And then that's where for me, the encounter with the other is the place where the real learning happens. If you're ever curious about who you are, then the most important thing that you can figure out is what is the effect that you have on other people. Not if you're this way or that way, but how do you actually affect the others? And there you begin to learn really who you are. That would be my advice.
There you go. I managed to drive out the wisdom out of him finally. In the last moment of the podcast. If you want to learn about yourself, you need to see yourself through the lens of others and how you impact other people.
Yes.
Complete. Thank you so much for coming to this podcast. We're going to list down all the information around your different social medias and also nonprofit organization that you participate in the description down below. It was lovely to talk to you. We can talk about this for the next 10 hours,
yes.
but sure that we invite you to another topic that is linked to this one. Thank you so much for coming to this recording today.
Yeah, let's do it again. Thank you for having me. Always lovely to see you, sir.
Okay, bye.
Bye.